What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another edition of NASCAR DFS Preview. I'm AustYn.
And I am Yacs.
And we are going up north to Dover International Speedway? Raceway? Dover Downs International something.
Dover Raceway.
Dover Raceway?
I don't know.
Anyways,
Dover.
Dover
Downs.
Yep, there we go.
Dover, Delaware.
So, for those of you who do not know, Dover is a 1 mile concrete oval track. Very high banked, very high speeds. It also is a 400 lap race. So since it is a true 400 mile race, a lot of times they kind of skimp out on that. But it's really fast, to be honest with you. Tires wear really fast here as well. Being that's concrete, it kind of eats away at that rubber for sure. And Goodyear is bringing 9 sets of tires for this event, which will be interesting. So
that seems low.
Yeah, it is a little low.
Yeah.
It's lower than Darlington as well, but I feel like Dover, the reason why, and also I researched this as well, this is the only race this year that we're having at Dover. First time in a long time. Maybe they did it last year because of the restrictions and everything in Delaware.
Yeah, I feel like I was looking it up. If I'm correct, I think it was 1972 is the last time. 1971 is the last time they only had one single race in the top series. So that's crazy.
Yeah. So I mean, this is a very traditional NASCAR race. They've been at Dover for a very long time. Like for example, Kevin Harvick has 40 starts here. I mean, a lot of your drivers, it was twice a year forever. So you had 9 sets of tires. It's the same tire code. So I guess they did run it last year at least once because
they did. It was back-to-back days.
Okay.
Yeah, it was like later in the season. I think that may have been the last doubleheader.
That's right.
That they ran last year.
Yep. Sorry, that slipped my mind there. But it's the 2020, same tire code as 2020. It is also the same left side tire that they used at Homestead and Darlington this year. So that is something that I looked at in terms of research.
That's interesting.
The left side tire, though, is more of a low pressure. So what they do, they put a really high amount of pressure on the right side because that's where all your torque and everything's coming from, basically. A lot of times you can wear that right rear out, or right front too, but right rear mostly. So one interesting thing to note, the left rear and left front is at 18 PSI, right? The right front and right front is 49. Right rear is 45. So there's a 4 PSI difference. It's pretty odd. I mean, it's different. I know that...
Yeah.
You know, if you've looked into, if you're a tire pressure nut, I guess you know what's going on. But I mean, that's kind of interesting. So you're going to see a lot more pressure on that right side. So it's going to be very important for those drivers to keep the tires, running well on long runs because that's what Dover produces. That's one of the reasons why they only have one race. It's because it's a long, boring race typically. So Jimmy Johnson was the man here. He dominated. And Hendrick Motorsports tend to run well, especially at concrete tracks in general. Yeah. But yeah, it's the Drydene 400. I know Corey LaJoie's got the Drydene sponsorship. I don't know if that'll help him. We had him last week. Last week was so difficult in doing the lineup that I feel like this week DraftKings may have gave me a little more of a. Let me reword that. I feel more comfortable as far as doing a lineup this week. But that could be scary. It could be that
I feel like I'm the opposite. I felt like I had a really good lineup last week, and one driver really messed us up in FanDuel. But I think we got a good lineup today with FanDuel. We'll see, though.
Yeah, I mean, I was near money even without Truex.
Yeah.
If I had Truex, that would have been a guarantee. But all my drivers did relatively well.
Yeah.
But yeah, one of the things that you'll have to note for me on DraftKings anyway is you want a driver that tends to take care of his equipment. Of course, past history at this track is very key. I looked at some Xfinity stats too. That is a little bit of a factor in my decision. But yeah, I guess that's pretty much it as far as prep for this.
Yeah, I don't have anything else to add. Really, you pretty much covered it.
Yeah, so let's just go ahead and see what DraftKings has to offer here. It's pretty obvious that Martin Truex Jr. was going to be the number one choice this week. He dominated the race last year. And I know DraftKings, I've said this week in and week out, but they're doing a different pricing strategy for sure. So Martin Truex Jr. starting on the pole at 11.9. That's pretty high. Kyle Larson starting in 4th at 11.5. Denny Hamlin starting in 2nd at 11.1. Chase Elliott starting in 8th at 10.7. Brad Keselowski starting in 15th at 10.3. And the 10K drivers, how about Kyle Busch cracking cracking the 10K, starting in 6th.
It's practically identical to FanDuel.
Yeah,
honestly.
So we have 6 drivers that are 10K, which is the norm pretty much. One of the strategies that I looked at for, last week, I went like Christopher Bell, my first pick. He started in 21st. I'm like, well, the value was just too good. I have to admit, I kind of went with a similar strategy this week. I already had in my head who I was probably going to roll with, no matter what the price was. And I'm just going to go ahead and scroll down here. So I'm not going to pick a top-tier driver. I know sometimes I like to pick the top tier, work myself down. But I'm going to scroll through here. You have some interesting starting spots. So Brad Keselowski's value starting in 15th is actually pretty good. He's just okay here. Well, I say okay. He's one of the better drivers here, actually. His average finish is 12.6, which is pretty solid. It is better than where he's starting, but we're not going that route. Brad has looked like he has not looked very good. I know it's a mile track, and it's also the lower downforce, higher horsepower engine package that they ran last week as well. But I'm not going to go Brad Keselowski. You got Alex Bowman starting in 16th. The 48 team really had a lot of bad luck at the beginning of the year, it seemed like. Now they're just not performing. He's not really getting in the top 10. He's not cracking the top 10 at all. I mean, he won Richmond, and to be honest with you, I think one of the reasons why he won Richmond is because it was a wreck fest there at the end. Let's see here. Kirk Bush starting in 28th is a great spot, but I am very leery of Kirk Bush. I know I spoke about this in the past years doing these videos. Kirk Bush has been around for a very long time, and when veterans hit a wall, they hit it hard, and they never recuperate. And Kirk Bush has not been a good performer this year at all.
He ruined my lineup last week, by the way.
A lot of people had him, and I think that a lot of people will pick him this week, probably. I'm not going to go that route. I didn't like his splits. They weren't very attractive to me.
I mean, that's a great starting spot for him,
is.
But I'm kind of with you right there.
Yeah. How about Ryan Blaney, 8,400?
Yeah.
Starting in 7th. You know why? Because he's terrible at Dover. He's like, I don't even know if he's finished in the top 15 ever.
Yeah.
He's god-awful. Now, he's won an Xfinity race, but, he was pretty bad at Darlington.
Yeah.
And he finished, 8th. We had him, and it was a good EV. It's a good return.
Yeah.
That was all I could do to not pick him. I'm just going ahead and tell you that I did not choose him. But the first driver that I pulled the trigger on was Eric Almarola, starting in 32nd at 8.2. So, I know that Stewart-Haas has been sucking it up this year. They've been terrible. Eric Almarola wrecked on lap 5. I get that. And I really don't know. Eric may not be with the team next year. But he's got a pretty solid repertoire at Dover. His average finish is 15.8. And in doing the math, if he finishes like 15th, that's 17 EV spots, right? You're going to get, trying to think off the top of my head, you're going to get 20-some points with that. I should know it by heart by now. But you're looking at like a high 30s return, even if he gets 15th. And I don't really think that's asking too much from Almarola. Even if he gets top 20, he's going to be in the 30s.
Yeah.
Which, you think about that, Ryan Blaney, even if he finishes like 7th, 8th, 9th, you're looking at 30-something.
Yeah.
So Eric Almarola, if he gets 15th like he has been running, that's a steal at 8,200, I believe. And I'm thinking that people have been drinking from the Smithfield Ford channel 10. Wow. Number 10. Sorry. I'm just a little... I don't even know what's going on with me right now. But Smithfield... the Smithfield Ford has not been performing well, so I'm hoping that people don't pick him. We'll see. Starting in 32nd. And, if I'm picking him, I've got to go his teammate Cole Custer because he wrecked about 20 laps later. No, I don't know. It was a little later than that, but he wrecked too. And he's starting in 30th. Now, one thing about Cole Custer, Eric Almarola's got pretty good history here. He's got some top 10s mixed in there. Cole Custer I know he's only got 2 starts, but his average finish is 10.5. He ran really well here last year. Xfinity Series, 5.3.
Yeah, he's really good here.
He also dominated every race he was in the Xfinity Series. Like Cole Custer at 7,700, he's actually priced pretty high compared to what he has been. And if you look at the drivers around him, Matt DiBenedetto starting in 18th. I went with Matt DiBenedetto last week. He started in 8th, and he didn't, he had a terrible race. Tyler Reddick starting in 12th, didn't like his number that well. Austin Dillon starting in 14th, really, really like picking Dillon when he's in that range, but his history just didn't do it for me either. So I'm like, I'm just going to pull the trigger on Custer because it's kind of just like Eric Almarola. He gets a top 15 for me, really top 20. I'm still looking at 30-some points. I feel great about that. The reality is at Dover, with 400 laps, you're going to have to pick a driver that leads a lot of laps. You don't try to pick that driver like, oh, yeah, that's him. You try to pick the value. I know that sounds confusing. But by doing Eric Almarola and Cole Custer, by getting those guys in the 8,000s, I've got my middle set. I feel good about the middle of the sandwich.
You have your climbers.
Yes.
I like to call them.
Yes, so in that way, and I can spend on the cheaper drivers, even if they're starting in great position, be a little riskier on it. So, scrolling down here, it was really... Let's see here. I'll just go ahead and go down to Justin Hayley. So, Justin Hayley actually had a very nice Xfinity Series stats. I don't know if you looked at him. But he never finished outside the top 15 in trucks or Xfinity at Dover, which is pretty interesting. You have to think, though, the field is different. He has been very underperforming this year in the Cup Series. The 77 car really is just a filler car to help Spire get on their feet. Basically, he doesn't need to wreck the car, I'm sure. Just keep all four tires on the track. So I don't know how he'll perform. I really wanted to pull the trigger on him, and when you do that, it does free you up to be more aggressive. But a driver that I wanted to go with, and I've actually been planning this for a couple weeks ahead of time. So I'm going with Daniel Suarez. He's starting in 24th spot. He's at 6,300. Daniel Suarez's average finish here is 13.8. Now you have to consider that was 2 races with Gaunt Racing. When he was in a Joe Gibbs Engines program, dude was top 10, top 15, automatic at Dover. This is one of his best tracks. And that team is pretty solid, actually. I would actually say they might be better than the 23 XI team. XI.
Yeah. 23-11.
Yeah, there we go. So I think that, I mean, they have been performing better than Bubba Wallace this year. And it's pretty remarkable what Trackhouse is doing. I believe they're using the Childress engines, I believe.
Yeah.
So I really look to see that 99 car. He could get a top 10. I would not be shocked. But I really like the ability for him to get a top 15. And at 6,300, that gives me plenty of room to go get a driver that I really want. So at 9,300, I'm going to scroll back up here and look at the top tier. So you have Martin Truex Jr. starting on the pole, 11.9. Hard to fade Martin Truex Jr. the way he dominated Darlington. You got Kyle Larson starting in 4th, 11.5. His pit crew got him in a good position to almost win that race. Now, Kyle Larson started like last week, 14th or so.
It was 14th.
It was in the teens.
Yeah, it was 14th, if I'm not
We
mistaken.
picked him for the second week in a row, and we're going to pick him again. So I'm going with Kyle Larson, starting in 4th. Reason being, Denny Hamlin started in 2nd. Denny's got a decent history here, but it's not one of his better tracks for sure. Martin Truex Jr. actually has an average finish of 11.5. He's got 3 wins, 2 in the last 10 starts, put it that way. And he's got 9 top 10s in last 10. So he's very dominant here. It was hard for me to fade him. But looking back at Kyle Larson, average finish is 7.4. It's crazy.
That's wild.
And I know I keep picking Kyle Larson. I know he was expensive this week, but I'm just going to keep going with him because I firmly believe he's going to be up front at the very beginning. And he was catching Truex. No matter what they say, he was getting him pretty good. He wore out his stuff. But, man, I don't know. I feel like that 5 team is on a different level right now. And if he can get out front and not get a speeding penalty, that's one thing he does. I'd love to see a stat on penalized drivers. He is like
It happens a lot with him.
He's like the Flozell Adams of NASCAR. Like that's going back a ways, I guess. But like the false starts,
If I'm not mistaken, Larson, I think he won his last race at Dover, didn't he?
I believe so.
I believe it was his last race. So it would have been the last race of 2019.
Yeah.
It was either 2018 or 2019 where he won. I knew he won at least one time there.
Yeah, and he's got 1 win, and he's already led like 600 and some laps.
Yeah.
Pretty wild.
Yep.
So I'm going with Kyle Larson, 11.5. That gives me the ability to... I didn't like Chase Elliott at the 8th spot. I really wanted to go with Chase because he's pretty good here. His average finish is 11th. Chase has not been showing speed this year. Brad Keselowski, afraid to touch that. Kyle Busch was intriguing, but didn't pull the trigger. So going with Kyle Larson, now we have an average remaining salary of $81.50. So, without further ado, let's scroll on down here to Christopher Bell. He's starting in 11th. Not going to go with him this week. Eric Jones starting in 23rd. History's not there. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. starting in 20th. He had a really good starting spot last week. But the driver that I'm going to pull the trigger on, it was down to Austin Dillon. Maybe just put it that way. So Austin Dillon starting in 14th, 7,400. He's got a few top 10s here. That leaves me with 8,900. I could go with William Byron, who has got a, 10 straight top 10 streak?
Yep.
He's pretty good here, too.
10 straight.
Did not go with him, though. I didn't like that lineup that well. So I could go with Kirk Bush as well or Ryan Blaney. But I thought of a driver that's pretty similar to Austin Dillon in a Chevy camp. And that is Ross Chastain. He's $6,500, starting in 19th. I was really impressed. I kind of am flip-flopping on Ross Chastain, whether I think he's a great driver. I know that sounds crazy. But it's like he was dominating in the Xfinity Series with the Ganassi team. Did pretty well last year with Colleague. But the way he drove on old tires at Darlington leading that race, and even though he ended up getting lapped, it was almost a great strategy. And he stayed up front for quite a while. That car was really sideways. And this is a track that requires a lot of mental focus. And I think he's got it, for sure. And I really like Ross Chastain to get me like a top 15 finish. The positive EV, that's all I'm shooting for right now. And that leaves me with $9,800 instead of the $8,900. And I think that Chastain will probably do just as well as Austin Dillon in terms of performance. So scrolling up here, we got Kevin Harvick starting in 5th, Joey Logano starting in 9th. I got 4 drivers I'm basically going to choose from. So Alex Bowman starting in 16th. Alex Bowman's performed really well since he's been in the Hendrick camp. Joey Logano's dominant here in the Xfinity Series at Dover, starting in 9th. Great spot. But I'm pulling the trigger on the old vet, Kevin Harvick. So Kevin Harvick has an average finish of 13.2. He's got 3 wins. And in 3 of the last 6 races at Dover, he's led over 200 laps. So I know that this year is not the same. I believe he's actually performing a lot better than what the car is. So I was more worried about Harvick hitting that wall for Kirk Bush, but I believe Kirk's hit it before. That's what I'm rolling with there. So Harvick got the 3 wins. He's a laps led leader, which I guess if you ran the most starts, you're probably going to have
Makes sense, yeah.
I mean, not all the time. You could be. I don't know. I couldn't think of a driver to burn there. So, all right. So we got Kyle Larson. Kyle Larson starting in 4th. Michael Waltrip, that'd be a good one.
Yeah.
Kyle Larson starting in 4th at 11.5. Kevin Harvick, veteran, starting in 5th. Feel very good about him getting the top 5. I think people will kind of fade him. So, got 4th and 5th there, 9,800. Scrolling on down here. Eric Almarola, Stuart Haas. We got 3 Stuart Haas cars, folks. They are coming back. Starting in 32nd. At 8,200, Cole Custer starting in 30th at 7,700, and Ross Chastain starting in 19th at 65, and then mi amigo Daniel Suarez starting in 24th at 6,300. So that is what we're rolling out for DraftKings. Let's throw it over to Yachts for FanDuel.
As I was doing my research this week, kind of similar to what I did last week, I wanted to look at starting position, but it's so difficult because they're not qualifying. They're not practicing. Yeah. I feel like I say this every week, but it's still the same thing.
Yeah. Can't wait till next year.
We don't know who's fast going into the race.
I have no idea.
It just sucks picking a lineup like this. But the number 2 starting spot of the last 9,
I did.
5 of the winners of the last 9 have started second.
That's wild.
So we're going to get that guy right out of the way. Denny Hamlin. Denny Hamlin, Austin mentioned that he's decent here, but not great. In the last 6, he's been really good. Well, I say really good. It's really good for most drivers. 9.2 in the last 6.
That's solid.
That's very solid. But in his career, he's got around like a 16th average finish in his whole career at Dover, which happens to be his 4th worst track.
Wow.
So
a lot of wrecks, I saw.
And if 16th is is your fourth worst track, you're a pretty good driver, I would say.
Yep.
Laps led are going to be key in FanDuel. Well, obviously completing laps and staying on the lead lap is going to be meaningful. But laps led is going to be huge. And Dover, your lap leader is most likely going to be your fantasy leader for the week. And he's led the second most laps in the last 6. I think it's Kevin Harvick. I believe it's Kevin Harvick in the last 6, which I think he is the career most, as Austin said. But Denny Hamlin, he's got a 75-point lead in the standings and doesn't have a win.
Yeah.
He's got to get that win sometime.
Harvick and Chase Elliott don't.
He's got to get that win sometime. And Harvick too. They've got to get that win sometime. And what better week for Dover?
Yeah.
I mean, we'll see what happens, but he's just been dominant this year, and he's only has top 5s to show for it, it's just crazy. 13,000, he's not the most, which I think you can just pull the trigger on him this week. 13,000, because you look at it, almost 63 points per race. That's the highest value, so you're getting him at third highest value. So you're gaining 2 spots in value there, basically. We're gonna move down though. Going to go all the way to the bottom. These guys down here, I feel like I waste my breath a lot of these weeks, but
especially at Dover.
Yeah, they're going to get lapped so easily. It'll be between 20 and 30 laps, and these guys will be lapped.
If that.
Yeah, a couple times over almost.
Yep.
So, Corey LaJoy with the Drydene. Drydene. All right. Anyway.
Man.
Corey LaJoy.
Karaoke night.
I don't. Where did he finish last week?
It was like 23rd or so.
Well, it's going slow for me. So it might not be a bad value at 26th.
22nd.
22nd. It says 26th on here.
No, started and finished.
Oh, well, okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
He's starting 26th. That may be a good value. I wouldn't pull the trigger on him. Justin Hayley, I don't really think you pull the trigger on these guys. Ross Chastain was a good pick, I feel like, starting in 19th. He's kind of proven himself in the last few weeks, it seems like.
Very consistent.
He goes up and then he goes down, and it's hard to gauge, like Austin said, it's hard to gauge whether he's going to be a really good driver or just an okay driver. You just don't know. But I think it's a good week for him, starting in 19th, 5,000. Chase Briscoe has a good history at Dover, from what I saw in the Xfinity Series. May not be a bad week. 17th, that may be a little steep, but 5,500, that's
11th.
That's very low. You could pull the trigger on him. Yeah. And honestly, I feel like you could pull a trigger on a couple of these guys below 8,000. I say 7,500, 8,000. I feel like you could pull the trigger on a couple of these guys down below, and you'll see it reflected in my lineup. I kind of went high-low this week. But we're going to move up. Eric Jones has a good history, but then again, he was in Gibbs equipment. Starting at 23rd, I think that could be a good pick. Ricky Stenhouse, not a bad pick. I think that's a little high, 20th starting spot. If it were around 25th, I would pull the trigger on him for sure. But, that's not a bad value for him, 6,300. Cole Custer. I really considered Cole Custer starting in 30th. Really good history here. But we went the driver one ahead of him. Daniel Suarez. 13.8 average in his only 8 races at Dover. Austin pretty much he said everything I was going to say regarding Daniel Suarez, but I'm going to say it again. I did the research for his Gibbs results. So 6.8 average in 4 races. That is awesome.
Yeah.
That is awesome. And in his Stewart-Haas days, he had 2 starts. It was around 12th. I think it was 12.5.
Yeah, I completely forgot about that.
So really solid regardless. Yeah. And starting at 24th, 6,700, he's proven himself this year, I feel like. And at Trackhouse, we didn't know what to expect out of them, and they've ran pretty well, to be honest. A lot better than what we thought. If he gets a top 15, that's all you ask of him at 6,700. And a lot of these guys that you're going to pick that can climb up, he's going to be hopefully one of your climbers that can gain 10 spots maybe and stay on the lead lap. So hopefully he does that on Sunday. But we're going to move up. And I believe this was your first driver off of the board. We're going to go with him too. Eric Almarola. He's going to be your big climber, I feel like. Starting in 32nd, 7,500. He has been very disappointing this year. Do you know where he is in the points?
He's like down there with Corey LaJoie, probably.
28th.
Yeah.
He is in 28th. He is just one above Anthony Alfredo.
He's lower than LaJoie.
Of the I say decent equipment cars, he's last. He's dead last.
Oh, yeah.
But he has good history here. 13.5 in his last 6. I believe he only has one top 10 though, but that tells me he's really consistent here, like consistently between 10th and 15th. Mm-hmm. So that's what you want. You want consistency out of these guys at a track, especially like Dover. And one interesting fact about Eric Almarola, he has a better career average than Denny Hamlin, just by one spot. But still, he has a one spot career average better, if that made sense. One spot career average that is better than Denny Hamlin. And again, Denny Hamlin, this is his 4th worst track, but still, it's a very good average considering. And
he drove for Petty too. So.
Yeah.
Hamlin's never.
I think Eric Almarola can get you. He'll definitely get you a top 15 if he's running in the end. Obviously,
yeah.
I think he'll get you a top 15, and 7,500. That's a good price for him. But hopefully we start to see Stewart-Haas getting into a groove, because they've just been wacky this year. I don't know what's going on with them, other than Kevin Harvick. It's just been a weird year for them.
And he's not even quite the Kevin Harvick of old, really.
No, he's not. Tyler Reddick, I believe he has a decent history here. Mm-hmm. But 12th is just, I feel like that's just a little too high of a starting spot to really go with him. But he's had a good year this year, and you could go with him. I think you could make a good lineup with him on your 5-man roster. Kirk Bush, like I said earlier, he was our guy that really messed up our lineup last week. We had a good lineup, and it happens. It just happens, especially when you only have a 5-man group. If one guy goes down, basically your whole lineup goes down, unless that one guy's owned like 60%, 70%, and he wasn't. So it just hurt us last week, but we move on, and I think I wouldn't advise pulling the trigger on him this week, but 28 starting spots pretty enticing. 8,500. I feel like that's just a little high to pay for him, but that's a good starting spot. Austin Dillon's been very impressive this year. I think among the winless drivers, I think he's like 3rd or 4th in the point standings, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
He's up there. I do know that. I think he's like 12th among the total point standings. Yeah. He's been really consistent, and I didn't really look at his history, but I think he's pretty good at here. But we are going to go in this area. Matt Benedetto. He was our driver last week that I mentioned that the 8th starting spot had won in like 3 of the last 13, and I was really considering him. And he didn't do that well last week. It wasn't terrible, but he didn't do well. He didn't do as we thought he would. But in his last 4, that's been the Levine family racing and the Woods brothers equipment. He has a 16th average finish in the last 4. But kind of moving from what I did last week, the same strategy, I'm going off of hot streaks. Now, last week he didn't perform especially well, but prior to last week, now I know this is a little crazy, but prior to last week, he had 8 straight finishes within the top 16. He had prior to last week, I think it was 3 straight top 10s.
Yep.
So I think they found a groove. Now, last week could be just like a fluke sort of deal, and I hope that's the case. And 8,000, he's been one of your more valuable drivers this year because he's been around this 8,000 range, and he's getting 50 points a race. I mean, that's really good. Starting in 18th, I think you can go with him. And I don't know if I mentioned this last week, but Dover is kind of like, I kind of see it like as a bigger Bristol. It's just like a mile-long Bristol almost.
That's closest comparison.
Because it's kind of got it's got the high banking going on. It's fast, and he's really good at Bristol. And now maybe that doesn't correlate when you're actually on the track, but he's really good at Bristol, and he's pretty solid. He's had some solid finishes at Dover, so I'm just gonna go with him this week. I think 8,000 is a good price for him. Moving on up. Well, I'll see. We have one driver left. We have 14.8 to spend. We can pick anybody we want. So we're going to spend a little time just kind of going up. Christopher Bell has a good history in the Xfinity Series. I didn't see what he did last year in the Levine family car.
It wasn't great.
I didn't think it was great, but I didn't really look. I didn't really consider him because I feel like I've been going with him a lot, and now that shouldn't be a strategy that you should enforce for yourself, saying, "Oh, well, I picked them a lot. I should stay away from them this week," and that's the week they'll overperform. So don't take that advice. But I didn't go with him this week. Ryan Blaney, not a great track for him, but he's just been consistent all year. I think he's still in the top 5 in the point standings. William Byron's. He doesn't have a particularly great history at Dover, but his last race, he finished 4th. So he could continue the hot streak, not only at Dover, but for this year. The 10 straight top 10s. Logano, surprisingly, he has not won at Dover. If I read my research right, he has not won at Dover in the Cup Series, but he has been so dominant in the Xfinity Series. So he is definitely not a bad option this week. He's never really a bad option at any track, I don't feel like. But 10-5, I think you have a lot of potential to create a good lineup if you have him in your lineup. But we're going to move up towards the top. Kevin Harvick is the most dominant driver among current drivers in history, in their respective history. I know Kyle Larson has the best finish or whatever, but Kevin Harvick's led a lot of laps. He's won 3 races along with Kyle Busch and Martin Truex Jr. I think a lot of people will be picking his way at 11.5 this week. That's really cheap for him. And he's finished. I mean, he's done well this year considering that Stewart-Haas has not done well as a group. He's still putting together some good finishes. Kyle Busch is on another hot streak, and I wouldn't blame you a bit for picking him in your lineup, starting in 6th. A lot of these drivers are just going to be the same story. They have a decent history here, and you could consider them. But when you have unlimited salary to go, you're going to pick the top guy, and that's what I went with this week. Martin Truex, he has 3 wins this year. He has 3 wins in his Dover career, which, like I said earlier, is a 3-way tie for the most among current drivers. In his last 6, 4.3 average finish. And, with FanDuel, you want to beat into your lineup that you have guys that can complete laps and can stay on the lead lap when it's all said and done. Martin Truex has proven that in his history. 15 straight lead lap finishes at Dover. 15 straight. So I think that's pretty much money right there. That's pretty much money. And his last 4 finishes. 2, 2, 2, 1. That's insane. So he's got a total finish. Again, I said total finish of 7 in his last 4. That is wild. And like Denny Hamlin and Joe Gibbs Racing this year, they've been really solid this year. And put Martin Truex in your lineup if you want to win this week. Nah, I'm joking. But I think he definitely yields the best value, and that's the reason why he was the highest salary guy this week. We're going to clear it up. Martin Truex, I think I've said all I need to say about Martin Truex. Starting in the 1 spot. Dover has a lot of guys that they finish really close to where they start. And Martin Truex has been one of, if not the best driver in the last 5 or 6 races of this season. And he's just hard to pass up on. Kind of the same thing with Kyle Larson. He's just really good here, and he's in better equipment. But we're going to go with Martin Truex this week. Denny Hamlin, starting in the 2nd spot. 2nd spot has yielded 5 of the last 9 winners. Denny Hamlin does not have a win this year, despite being the 75-point standings leader this year. We're going to go with him. He has the 3rd highest value, but he is the most valuable driver among the field. We're going to move down. And I feel like last week we didn't have one Tier 1 driver. We're going with 2 right off the top, 2 of the top 3. But when you do that, you have a big stretch here to your next guy. And Matt Benedetto's next. Has a decent history here. I think he can climb up from the 18th starting spot. And I think my prediction for Matt Benedetto this week is the top 5. I think he'll get a top 5 this week. He has ran well in the last month. And I mean, that is a little bold, but I think he can do it for certain. And this track kind of fits his driving style, I feel like. And Eric Almarola, starting in 32nd, he's going to be your climber. You hope to get a top 15, at the very least a top 20 with Eric Almarola. And I think he can do that this week. And you can pick him every once in a while, but he's just been kind of disappointing. But I think this is his week to turn it around. I hope it is anyway. And Daniel Suarez will be our last guy picked. Awesome history here. In good equipment, he has an awesome history. 13.8 in his only 8 races here. And Trackhouse has just been solid this year. And I believe that's going to do it for our FanDuel lineup this week.
All right, so there you have it. We had 2 varying strategies here. So Yachts went on FanDuel. He went the 1-2, basically. FanDuel laps completed are so important. You want to stay on lead lap. Truex has got that long streak of, lead lap finishes. Mm-hmm. Also, that was the site of his first win years back. Yeah. And that was the DEI car. That was the Martin,
it was.
Yeah, the Bass Pro Shops car.
Number 1.
Yep. So he's also, they call it his home track, and I think they call it Joe Logano's home track as well, but it's not in their home state, so I don't know how you can call it their home track,
That's the closest one.
Get off my soapbox there.
To the Cup Series, yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, Dover is just, to me, it's a fun track to pick from. I tend to perform well at these kind of tracks, the more boring races, because you, set it and forget it. We've been watching, me and Yachts have been watching NASCAR since we can remember, so it's one of those things where you, cut the race on, take a nap, cut it on 10 laps to go, and then you kind of know how it's going to work.
Oh, that's the way it ended, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, so that's what we got rolling out here on DraftKings and FanDuel. If you got any questions, comments, or concerns, just hit us up on the video below here. Subscribe to our channel. That way you know every time we got videos coming up. Also, hit the notification. That way you know when the video goes up. Also, check out our website at thesportschief.com. We're on Twitter at thesportschief, and we're also on Instagram as well. Who knows? Maybe later on this year or next year, we'll be able to go to some races and maybe cover some. So that'd be pretty cool.
Yep.
Maybe have a tailgate thing going on. We do our video.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. Anyway, so, I guess that's about it.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add.
Yeah, so best of luck to you at the Drydene 400 at Dover Downs.
All right, thank you.